Garret, welcome. Excited to have you here. We've been looking forward to this for the last month or so since we reached out and wanted to bring you in. I'm really excited to kind of hear more of the inside story. I've seen your business from the outside just grow and grow year after year after year, and culminated with a really exciting announcement being number 20 on the Inc. 5000 list, which I think was a very public display of some of the success that you guys have had over the last 5 years. So I'm really interested today to learn more about how that's happened and the non-linear side of growth in the e-commerce space. So what I want to do today is turn it over to you, and you can bring up your slides here, and love to let you kind of take over. And then what I'll do is I'll moderate, bring in questions. So if you guys are watching, and as Garret goes through and shares some of his knowledge, what he's learned from growing Kindred Bravely, if you got questions, put them in the Q&A tab, and I'll moderate and ask them either during or at the end of this presentation. And let's both.
Thanks, Austin. It's good chatting with you again, and happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
No, very excited.
So when we were working on this title, it feels, I don't know, ominous, big. It was, after I looked back at the numbers, it wasn't quite this bad. It sure felt bad at the time, but I think the exact number is we lost 406,000 and some change when I went back through the actual accounting. And then we turned that into the subsequent year netting about 1.3 million. So happy to talk today about the journey, and it's not straight. That's by no means. So hopping in, a little bit about myself. My name is Garret Ackerson, co-founded Kindred Bravely with my wife, Deanne, in 2015. And she was breastfeeding our youngest at the time and couldn't find anything comfortable to wear. And here we are, still alive and thriving, I should say, in 2020. 5 years later, we made some fun, notable kind of milestones along the way. One that Austin mentioned, number 20 on the Inc. 5000 up for 2018 that came out in 2019. And we just made it again for 2019. Diving in, what I thought I'd talk about today was just takeaways and what we did. So this is actually us in the beginning. That's me taking a picture of Deanne, my wife, and our two kids. At the time, 5 years ago, they were definitely little, and they're home doing homeschool. So one of them actually just popped in right now as well to tell me about the solar system he is designing with Legos. The little one that's sitting there on the ground, it's not so little anymore. The big things for me were, and for us as a team were, knowing your numbers, and I'll go through each of these, making KPIs a team event, spending time thinking and investing and learning as a leader, as a manager, as an entrepreneur, finding the right partner, and thinking in, I'll call it thinking in dominoes, not the pizza, but the little dominoes, and building a flywheel. So a little bit of background. Like I said, we started in 2015 and launched with just one pair of black pajamas in 4 sizes. Crazy to think. And then shortly after that, launched 2 different nursing bras, the French terry bra and the organic cotton bra. And those actually were when we really started to see some traction and took off. In 2017, we won the Shopify Build a Bigger Business competition as one of the fastest growing, online retailers on Shopify. And so everything was like boom, like just meteoric, straight up, super exciting. We won a ManyChat bot contest in 2017. And then along comes 18, and this timeline doesn't show it, but we had a couple patents that we were working forward on in 2018 that were awarded. And I think what all these graphs don't show is then they don't show what you're netting in the end. So in 18, we actually had 5 straight months of losses, negative net, starting in May of 2018. And then culminating in August 2019, we made number 20 on the Inc. 5000. Ironically, for 2018, a year where we were losing money on the bottom line, but still continuing to double top line. And I love this quote from Dan Sullivan, for a company to grow 10x, it doesn't need you managing it, it needs self-managing. And I think this is one of the key takeaways that, 2018 really emphasized for us was just knowing our numbers and making it a team event. So I had tried for the longest time to integrate different platforms using Grow or Tableau and integrating Google Analytics and Facebook Analytics and all of your marketing spend and your metrics. And none of them ever worked. They partially worked or they broke all the time. And we just could not seem to get there. And then as a team, no one owned them when we did it that way. So the big thing that I think part of the shift was I finally just kind of gave up in exasperation and said, look, we're just going to do this manually, old school. So we created a Google Sheet, talked to, different entrepreneurs in e-commerce, looked up different stats, and here are the metrics we came up with to run our business. And this was in 2018 when we were in the thick of it. This got implemented in August. So that's about 4 months in to us losing money month over month. And for us, we have a top level scorecard in our Google Sheet, and then we have tabs for each of the different scorecards, kind of by department or area. So the top level scorecard for us is just, hey, what are your net sales? For us, we sell on Amazon and Shopify. So net sales, gross sales, and margin on Amazon. And then Shopify, what are our net sales and what are our gross sales? And then margin, including marketing, excluding returns. Then we look at ROAS, ad spend as a percentage of sales, and then inventory. So what we experienced in 2018 was we just did not have a good handle on our metrics and on our numbers. And in particular, we saw our ad spend as a percentage of sales just increase and increase. And it just wasn't efficient. We were not scaling. We were spending quite a bit without seeing the growth. We had a number of other headwinds as well. At the time, we moved from a 3PL to moved all our fulfillment in-house. We spent a lot on a warehouse. We implemented NetSuite, and we tried a Kickstarter campaign. So we had all these one-time expenses, increased our head count, and at the same time saw Facebook performance decline or not improve much, and which led to 5 months of unprofitability. And in addition to having inventory just continuing to bloom, which is why we have inventory on this sheet as well on our top level scorecard, just to see how it's doing. Weekly advertising report I pulled out because this one was the one key area where we had the most control and had the most impact, ad spend. So for us, we look at gross sales overall channels, then we dive into Shopify gross sales and Amazon, and return on ad spend from advertising. And then we also look at our agency fees, and then advertising as a percentage of gross sales. And then down below that, we just break it out. So we look at Facebook and Instagram, and then AdWords, and then underneath this would be, for us, Amazon pay-per-click, Pinterest spend, any influencer spend, any affiliate spend. And the questions we were looking to answer were what is your advertising as a percentage of gross sales? We realized that, quickly, if we got into certain territories, that all of a sudden we started losing money. And at what percent of gross sales is advertising unprofitable? Answering that question. What return on ad spend do you have to hit to be profitable for us? And if you don't track them, we just realized we didn't really know what net sales are break even and what cover fixed costs. And this was maybe even bigger than some of the other things for us, realizing that we had to scale some just to cover new fixed costs. Otherwise, we would continue to be negative. And then, also looking at optimal inventory levels, because if you miss forecast continually, because you're not growing or scaling as anticipated, then inventory balloons. So you kind of have this double-edged sword where you have all this cash tied up in inventory. Just makes it worse.
One question back on that slide.
Yeah.
I see there's light blue on the weekly advertising report on certain metrics. What's the differentiating factor between the light blue and the ones that are not highlighted?
So I had heard and read from others that technically, you should only have 2, 3, maybe 4 key metrics.
Sure.
Yet you can see we have, well over that. And, if we continued scrolling down the sheet, there would, probably 40 of them. And so we just highlight the ones that are key to us, but we track the others as well. So the highlighting just for us is to highlight, hey, here's the ones we really care about.
Sure.
And so you'll see in like the top level scorecard, it's ad spend as a percentage of sales that we look at a lot, and then cash at the bottom there, cash / credit card payments coming up for ad spend.
That makes more sense. And are you updating these every week?
These get updated every week. And so what we did was we have it where every team member is responsible. So it's not me inputting it. It's not one person on the team inputting it. And this was just out of frustration at the time and lack of bandwidth. And it has, I think, led to probably the reason why this has been successful. One of the best parts of this, every team member is in this sheet every week entering numbers. And so if you enter your own numbers, I feel like you own them a lot more. And them a lot better. Myself or anyone else can get in here and post comments. So you'll see comments like, hey, why was this at this? Or what happened here? And there's a whole section for comments in your area that you own. I think one of the other things here that was key for us was that we don't set goals. None of these have goals. They have standards. So there's a standard column that says you have to hit this number. So we know that number that we have to hit to either maintain profitability or grow or whatever it is that's pertinent to that metric. And it's not like a goal. It's something you should be hitting 80% of the time. And so the conversation then is, if you miss it, it's a significant conversation because it's hey, why did we miss? What happened here? You shouldn't miss your standard. Standards don't get missed. Goals do get missed. The standards don't. And that's something. In fact, this whole thing, skipping ahead a little bit to the learning section, was in 2018, even in the middle of losing money, we still invested in learning. So this all came from Keith Cunningham's 4-day MBA, and basically examples out of that just borrowed, in particular, the standards section, having standards, not goals.
Very cool.
I love Winnie the Pooh. Pay attention to where you're going, because without meaning, you might get nowhere. I think that, without spending time thinking, and this was, again, a big takeaway from Keith Cunningham and in particular the 4-day MBA, but also just reading his The Road Less Stupid, was spending time critical thinking and realizing how little time as a business owner I was spending there, how easy that is to do. And so the big thing there, the takeaway, was spending time weekly, creating a routine. So big part of this was just calendaring the time, having it designated. You're really just trying to create a habit, designated thinking spot, coming with a topic ahead of time or something you want to think about. A great example of this is in 2018, when we were losing money, we decided to run a Kickstarter, and it was on a new product. And just looking back at that, I just shake my head thinking, how did we come up with that idea? Just a bad idea. One, we had cash tied up in inventory, so we needed to move current inventory, not be having to order new inventory. And two, it was just an unproven tactic. And so it ended up costing us about $60,000. And we ended up canceling the Kickstarter. And I think if I had just if I had thinking time before then, or just spent the time to actually think about it, would have realized, well, I have a lot of inventory that I actually need to turn into cash. And this is a pretty big bet. What if it doesn't work out? Which it didn't. And so coming with a topic ahead or something you want to think about, having a specific thinking notebook and pen. This is Keith. He has a specific pen and notebook. And then just writing continuously for 40 minutes, could be less, but typically at least 40 minutes. And then he has this little thing where he adds a bullet after each, line that he writes, because you kind of run out of things to write. But if you add a bullet, his argument is your mind will fill in the next bullet, and it seems to work. And then the next for us was investing in learning, which I kind of alluded to. Never be afraid to pay for learning. This was certainly challenging in 2018 when losing money, easy when you're making money. But the 4-day MBA is not inexpensive. I think it's a great value, but it's not inexpensive. And so even while we were losing money, I thought it was more important than ever to attend that. I can think of so many areas where paying for learning in the end paid off. Even looking back to like 2016, 2017, I remember attending a Freedom Fastlane event that saved me $300K in taxes just off one conversation. The 4-day MBA maybe arguably saved us from bankruptcy, or certainly helped significantly. Brand growth experts, Austin has done a lot of consulting for us. Vistage, I was a member of Vistage for years. And then Deanne, my wife, attended Vistage throughout 2018, 2019. So I think any opportunity, even one takeaway can often be worth the price of admission. For us, I think the other big part of it is I hear about it, but I don't know of people that don't come back and implement. So like we always have a process where afterwards we try to debrief, and then we get help implementing what you learn. Like I'm not going to be the one that implements it all, but certainly sitting down with the team, figuring out what to implement, and even implementing non-scalable ideas. And our KPI sheet is an example of that. We'd try to do, quote, the scalable solution forever, the automated version. And it wasn't until we went to the 4-day MBA that I said, that's it. We just have to do this. We're just going to do it manually. I think that made a huge difference, because we still use that to this day. When we transitioned to NetSuite in 2018 was one of the other big things. And it was such a mess transitioning from QuickBooks to NetSuite that we did not have financials, I kid you not, for an entire year. And we ran the entire business off that KPI sheet that you saw pieces up above. I mean, it's quite a large KPI sheet. It probably has 7 or 8 tabs, but we were able to use a forward-looking cash flow statement and a KPI sheet to run, a multi-million-dollar business.
That's pretty impressive. It's a good testament for that sheet.
Yeah. It's wrong, and at the same time, I'm glad it worked.
Do you have a process? So the number 3 and 4 here, I'm really interested in, because I feel like that is where people fall off, right? The debrief, and then getting help implementing what you've learned from some of these events. Do you have a process for, Dan Sullivan talks about this debrief a lot, but do you have a process for debriefing? How do you maximize your value from attending events or training?
I would say I don't try to cover everything. It's just overwhelming. And I just look for at least coming away with 1, if not 2 nuggets or takeaways from each, event or session or coaching. So like for Dan Sullivan and his 10X Mastermind, I attended that in 2019, and we would meet quarterly. And I would just come away with 1 or 2 things out of that quarterly meeting that I wanted to implement with the team. I'd have copious notes on a lot of other things. So 1, I think, just taking notes. And then 2, I would get back and, if you're using Traction or some other system, is just to have a good implementer, someone on the team where you can sit down with and walk through the ideas that you want to implement. And so for me, that's a big thing, because I love ideas and I love learning, and I'm a high quick start if you use the Kolbe or are familiar with that. And so I have the ability to start things, and then I need other team members to carry them forward. And so for us, it was finding a good integrator. Again, if you're kind of looking at the Traction model, for us, that's our kind of de facto COO that helps move all those things forward. And then we adopt them. So like any handouts or ideas or concepts, we'll come back and sketch them out or use the handouts, and then we'll morph them into our own documents and kind of do our own take on them. And it's usually not everything. So I think thinking of Dan Sullivan, over a year, I have a folder, but there's probably only 4 or 5 things that we quote implemented, really one a quarter, 1 or 2. But there are significant ones like his, impact filter. We still use that one. And then.
So do we. We use the impact filter as well.
Yeah. It's
really
great.
Powerful.
Really powerful tool. So yeah, I've never come up short on number 4, investing and learning.
Cool. Very, very, absolutely such a powerful slide. So thank you for going through that.
Yeah. The next 2 or the last couple here, I guess it's last 3, is more focused around this, that the business enterprise has 2 and only 2 basic functions: marketing and innovation. Marketing and innovation produce results. All the rest are costs, according to Peter Drucker. And so, finding the right partner, and in this case, I'm referring to marketing partner, but it could be any. And this is looking for us in particular because this is obviously in e-commerce, a core area of business is marketing, advertising spend. So for us, if you look at this, I graphed here from May of 18, when we started losing money, all the way until we started making money in November. And you can see the difference here. It's not, I don't think it's glaring, but you'll notice that gross sales starting in November are significantly high enough to cover fixed costs is the main difference there. And ad spend as a percentage of sales drops and stays pretty steady after that. If I were to graph this out further, it drops even more and stays very steady. But what we found with the partner, the agency we were working with at the time, was actually 2 contractors, was just a lot of volatility and no ability to scale past a certain kind of benchmark. And it was scary. Like, we interviewed multiple agency partners and checked references, and we just weren't sure, like, particularly you're going into Q4 holiday period, if we were going to make the switch or if we should make the switch. And it was one of the best decisions we made, if not the best. I would say, 2 key things in 2018 that really turned things around for us. One was attending the 4-day MBA and getting metrics and KPIs in place. And number 2 was switching our advertising agency to a different agency. And I really think the difference between a good agency and a great agency is that ability to scale, certainly to control costs as well. But for us, it was, if you fast forward, all the way now to 2020, the scale is totally different. It wouldn't even be on this chart. And we interviewed like 3 or 4. And I think what really made the difference was checking references, just talking to people that had worked with them, currently work with them, and knowing if they were similar to us or different and how they had scaled. So that was, I would say, the number 1 or number 2 key turning point in us from going from losing money from, May through October to making money starting in November, really starting on Black Friday, Cyber Monday. And this, our new agency partner totally changed our thinking as well on Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and how to approach it.
That's really interesting. How did they change your thinking? At
the time, and I feel like it's less common now, but at the time, the whole entire approach to Black Friday, Cyber Monday was costs go up significantly because inventory shrinks on Facebook. Therefore, you should spend as much as you can in the lead up in October or November in acquiring emails or generating interest, and then scale back on your acquisition or prospecting in Q4, particularly Black Friday, Cyber Monday, skew prospecting back, just do a lot of retargeting. You've already pixeled a very large audience. Now you can retarget them. That's how our prior agency had approached it. And our new agency was like, that's crazy. Like, buyer intent is higher than ever come Q4. And come Black Friday, Cyber Monday, everyone is shopping. It's so while inventory is reduced, ad inventory, your conversion rate's going to go way up. So they were totally against the idea of building this big list ahead of time and doing all of this where we switched from prospecting to retargeting. They went in with the intent of acquiring new customers over Black Friday, Cyber Monday. And it was hugely successful. Our conversion rate was way up. Our return on ad spend didn't increase because our subsequently our conversion rate also improved significantly. Going from in the 3s all the way up to 7%, just because buyer intent is so high over that weekend.
Super interesting.
Yeah. And then simplified things. Everything got a lot simpler. Prior to that, we had tons of ad groups and tons of campaigns, tons of ad sets. And they just squashed it all down, made it much easier.
Cool. I'm going to have follow-up questions after you're done with this. Probably going back towards that.
Number 6, thinking in dominoes. And let's see, is it working? Oh, cool. The little GIF's going to work. So a small domino can topple a building. I was looking at the physics of this. There's this experiment with the domino that topples this one. Hopefully the GIF is working for everyone. It's like you got to use tweezers to get it. That's the size of a Tic Tac. Topples that huge domino. And this is something that we started as a team early on, just talking about success is sequential, not simultaneous. Just focusing on one thing as individuals and as a team just allows you to go further and faster. We use this to tackle quarterly goals. If you're, using a traction again called rocks or MIT's most important things, sprints, everything. And so again, kind of going back to that learning, read the one thing, because I think, reading, obviously you can learn just as much there or more sometimes. But after reading the one thing, I happened to run into, I'm not going to get it right now. It's the current president of that's running the one thing. And he had talked at a conference, and I was chatting with him afterwards, and he just said, "Oh, I'd be happy to hop on and give your team a presentation or talk about the one thing," because I told him how we were using it. And so we still use that, his presentation to our team as onboarding for team members. And we have specific 90-day sprints, a template that we kind of built in-house that borrowed from the one thing and a few other things, that then breaks a quarter down into 2 outcome goals. They're each 6 weeks. And then the outcome goals are broken down then into 3 2-week goals. Like the dates line up and are made so every team member has a sprint, and it's all very sequential. We talk about also how the evils of multitasking, as it were, and really just push that when you're on and you're just focused on one thing. I think it just makes it so much easier.
Garret, do you have an example of that, what you were talking about, the breakdown of the sprint?
Yeah, I do. I can probably share it here during the Q&A because I know you and I have some Q&A time.
Cool.
I can pull it up here. Number 7, the last one, just creating a flywheel. So for us, I think we would not have survived if we didn't already have one flywheel going. So for us, I think for any successful business or business that's growing, you likely already have one. For us, Amazon, we really got Amazon when we launched in 2015. We launched on Amazon and Shopify. We just focused on Amazon. It worked for us. It didn't take a lot of management. It produced, enough cash to then start hiring and working on that second flywheel. So once you have one flywheel, take that, borrow that, and move on to the second. I think that's seems to me as the easiest way to scale. And I know this isn't true for everyone, but for us, we took all the earnings, not all, but a portion of those earnings from Amazon as it scaled from 2015 to 2017. And then in 2017, put those into growing our own store sales, Shopify, specifically through getting Facebook working and Facebook ads, that whole flywheel, and then using adaptation and experimentation to get that going, because then you have that something to fall back on. Because if we hadn't had reserves, we couldn't have taken 5 negative months of losing money. And those 5 negative months were in a large part due to, scaling the team and resources, and then scaling Facebook marketing spend in particular. And then just having that money to invest, I would say, again, just made all the difference. And so, yeah, good to great flywheel concept. I love applying it to just an area of business. I think you often see it as applied to a whole business, like Amazon's flywheel, shorter technology and shipping times and making customers happy. So I think certainly, obviously, you can have it as applied to a whole business, but I think you can also have it in areas like, how does your, this part of your business, this flywheel work, and how does it support other parts, whether that's influencer marketing or Facebook or content or email.
Garret, could you explain a little bit the flywheel concept if somebody hasn't read the book? Like, what does it mean exactly to create a flywheel in one area of your business?
So the flywheel concept is this concept that if you continually improve or start a process of continual improvement, that this consistency kind of creates this self-generating wheel. So for us, using like Amazon as an example, we started out with just 3 products on Amazon and spending a lot of time understanding A9 and the algorithm there and how to rank products on Amazon, how to get reviews, what those email sequences and follow-ups look like to get reviews, what inserts looked like. So then we started accumulating results, which in Amazon's terms would be sales for that product and reviews. And then you organically would get more and more sales because your A9 ranking for Amazon's A9 algorithm, you would rank higher. If you're all of a sudden in the top, you get in the top 12, and then you get in the, your number 5. And then if you can get up 2 or 3, that kind of goes to, people start lining up, they get energized by the results. But I think also just customers start seeing you, and this whole process, it builds momentum where your Amazon pay-per-click improves and gets better and better because you've learned more there. Your product inserts get better on how to solicit reviews. Customer care gets better on how to filter out negative reviews. And you kind of build this entire little ecosystem or flywheel of just continually improving an area of business. As applied in Good to Great, it's to an entire company. And we've always just applied it to an area. And then taking that, then applying it to Facebook, how we improve those ads, how we improve our conversion rate, how we improve our return on ad spend, et cetera, et cetera.
That covers it. That covers it for sure. Probably go into it a little bit more in the Q&A section here. If you guys have questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A tab, and we'll go through those.
Cool. Oh, well, speaking of which, I think we're there. That was my last slide. Number 7.
Okay. Cool. That's
I did
awesome.
leave on the end here too some resources, books or other things that I read along the way and that helped.
Cool. We can pop the video on and put the slide down. Tons of wisdom in there, and some really, really good topics you covered. And like each one of those could probably be their own presentation. Each one of those things is like in depth enough to like dig into. But I got a couple questions, and I'll bring these up. And if you guys have any questions, you're watching this or watching the recording, if you're watching the recording, post underneath. But if you're here live and you have some questions, this is a great time to ask Garret. So one of them was around your thinking routine. You talked about a thinking routine. What does your thinking routine look like today?
Yeah. So for me, I have it calendared same time every week. And I experimented with different days. And for me, it's a Thursday. I haven't done the whole, Keith has a specific chair and everything. Like, he talks about, he has a chair and a pen and a book. For me, it's just a pencil and pad, yellow pad. I don't have one specific location. Usually it's the back patio though. Not in front of technology. I will say that. I think it's much better if you're not sitting in front of your computer.
What are some questions that you might prompt yourself or you found to be helpful prompts when you're going into this?
Oh man, there is a whole long list in The Road Less Stupid, but my favorite usually center around like, how might this go wrong, or what am I missing here? Usually those are the ones that help the most. What if we miss this number, or what if this doesn't work?
Cool. And work your way through that.
Yeah.
Who was your first hire and why?
So our first hire was customer care. And because we were headed to China to meet with suppliers and needed somebody to answer emails on the phone. That was in 2016, March of 2016, because we were headed to China in April.
And you needed somebody to be there while you were gone?
Yeah, we just needed somebody. It was just the two of so the first year it was just the two of us working on that in the evenings. I still was working full time throughout 2015, and then 2016 is when I quit. And March of 2016, it kind of got to the point where we needed somebody to help out with answering customer emails and questions and responding to comments and feedback on Amazon.
Do you have any thoughts around non-customer support or customer service hires? Like what should be the first non-customer support or customer service hire?
For us, our second hire was a marketing generalist, marketing / kind of project manager. It was somebody that wore kind of all hats, like could help out with a lot of marketing stuff, and that we could hand things off to, or I could in particular, different ideas to run with. Not an idea person, but a real like doer. I think that's big, is somebody that has high follow through, on a Kolbe, and that can carry projects forward.
You mentioned the Kolbe score. I'm a huge fan of the Kolbe score as well. Do you use that for hiring?
We do, yeah. Every new hire we run, like we have them complete a Kolbe score, Kolbe index. And we've used, although only once, the Kolbe assessment where you can compare the traits you are looking for in the position to the applicants. Cool. They'll run that for you as well. That's a bit expensive, so we tend to just have them take the Kolbe test and look to see if it meets what we think the profile would need.
Sure. I got a couple of questions here from the audience. So how could you create a flywheel in Shopify? I'm selling on Amazon and starting my Shopify store. What would be your advice around creating a flywheel in Shopify?
Well, okay. I will say not within Shopify, right? Because Shopify is your platform that you're using. And I think you would then have to decide, are you going to create a flywheel around content? And at least in my mind, I would break it up. Like, are you going to focus on just really great content? Does the product lend itself to great content with little to no actual ad spend? An example of this would be like fringe sport, right? Killer content via email and other areas. They don't spend money on advertising. So there's plenty of e-commerce examples that their flywheel is just that really great customer connection and voice and content. So that to me is kind of a flywheel, how you would build that out. Another flywheel would be around ad spend. Like, how are you going to create an entire build or flywheel around specifically Facebook spend and Instagram spend, which means you're going to have some content, but not nearly as much as the other. And you're going to have to probably, have great static ads, great imagery. So creating a flywheel around that would be, creating the assets or finding the team to create the assets, and then just testing using marketing, however much you're comfortable with on the marketing side, spend to then drive to collection or PDP pages. And then I think that's where it goes back to the flywheel does in all these cases to your site is you're going to have to pages and PDP pages, product detail pages, to increase your conversion rate. For us, the big focus there, if you were just looking at Shopify, would be how, for us, we focus on how do you increase AOV. Because if you're going to go after the flywheel for, paid spend, your AOV has to be high enough to support that. I think if you have an AOV, in the 30 or 40, even the $50 range, it's going to be really tough for you just to get anywhere. So one thing you could, and if you don't concentrate on it first, you could later, you will have to, is increasing AOV. And that's going to be cross-selling or upselling, whether that's in your cart or before cart, and it's probably both, and playing with pricing. So it's going to be, product mix, pricing mix, and, maybe playing with your free shipping threshold to really get all of those in alignment and working. It's amazing how many different like small things you can tweak in there that can make a big difference. But so I kind of, going back, content to me is kind of a content flywheel, a paid advertising flywheel. I think either of those need email, certainly. So I don't know that I would consider that a quote flywheel, although maybe you could. And another flywheel, which I don't know a lot about, would be like an influencer one in my mind. Like if you're using YouTube influencers or Instagram influencers, and then a fourth one would be affiliates. Like you could just perfect the whole affiliate game. I know there's entire companies that are just built off affiliate commissions, and they really get that. So I kind of use the flywheel concept of like, what is your core of how you grow and scale your business, at least one area.
Sure. And something that can be self-reinforcing and you get better. And the winners in a lot of those channels get disproportionate rewards. It's absolutely crazy.
Disproportionate. I think, and I why I like this concept, I think if you concentrated on all of those, like if you tried to do content, paid, influencer, affiliates, unless you have VC backing and really deep pockets, and even then, just forget about it. You're just going to, you won't have the pockets or the time or the resources. I think even if you had the deep pockets to do it, from a resource and expertise perspective, it would still be really difficult. You'd probably be much better just getting really good at one and then going to the next one. Sure.
No, that makes sense. That's good advice there. I would love to talk a little bit about capital management. So the discussion was about 2018. You guys lost a bunch of money. 2019, you had a great year, netted a bunch. What have you learned around, like, do you have benchmarks or things that you think about managing cash that you've learned during this process? I'm sure you have some. What are some of the benchmarks or things that you're like targets and goals that you've created for yourself and for the business to help you make better decisions that put you in a better financial position?
Great question. So yeah, short answer is yes. I had said before, we really ran Kindred Bravely off of just a forward-looking cash flow statement, 13-week. We had actually extended ours out to about 20 weeks. And a KPI sheet, the one that we shared. And so I think the big thing, if you don't have one, forward-looking cash flow statement is my favorite financial statement, I would say. Like, great, yeah, P&L, balance sheet, whatever. But just having a forward-looking cash flow statement that's by week, out at least 13 weeks, is critical. In particular, so for us, I would assume for everyone, it's managing when you have POs due to suppliers, because that's going to be your biggest hit on cash. And then payroll, probably not so big, but then ad spend. So really it's POs, then ad spend, at least for us, and then payroll are going to be the big three. And just seeing like what the impact of those is going to be moving forward and how much cash you need to support operations. And I mean, out of all of that, it was, certainly the most stressful year of my life, probably, certainly of this business would be 2018. I wouldn't want to repeat it. In retrospect, it's nice to have it over with, and we learned a lot from it. It made 2020 a lot easier because we weren't so worried.
And is that because of the systems you created during 2018 to manage cash flow
Yeah.
2020 was a lot easier.
Yeah. It depends obviously what sector you are in e-commerce. We're way up. And I think a lot of sectors in e-commerce are, but even given that, before everyone knew kind of what was going to happen or how things were going to go, somebody was saying, just how 2020 was so stressful and so bad. And I was thinking, man, 2018 was way more stressful on me than 2020. So it's just all perspective. But I think for us, it's looking at what cash buffer you want. That's going to be different for everyone, what you're comfortable with. And by size too, right? Because it changes as you scale. I think kind of a good metric, for probably most businesses is at least 2, if not 3 months of cash in the bank, to cover 2 to 3 months. Now, it may fluctuate some, and I consider cash as access to line of credit as well. So if you have a line of credit with your bank plus your cash in your bank for at least 2 to 3, that is okay with me. It's going to be probably thinner than some people. Some people will say, they want 5 or 6 if they're including their line of credit.
Sure. That's what Greg Crabtree was on talking about a couple months ago. He was like, don't include line of credit, you need cash. I think generally he's pretty conservative as far as what he's looking for. And
yeah. I mean, you're better off that way because then you have a longer buffer.
Yeah.
Right. And so, managing cash for us is, good relationships with banks, maintaining that or improving it, making sure we have access to capital, and then having, money in the bank.
What does your financial reporting rhythm look like now? Like, do you get reports weekly? How did you set that up? And what did the team look like that you had to put in place to be able to get those reports in a timely manner?
Oh man, accounting is it's a tough one. I guess it depends. I feel like it's a tough one for a lot of people, but for us, we have, now we have month end. So we always do month end close, and it's by the second week. So next Tuesday, I'll be looking at September numbers. It's always on a Tuesday. I have an accounting meeting every Tuesday that's standing. So for us, we're always looking at numbers on Tuesdays for a half an hour. And it's not necessarily last month's financials, right? Like today's a Tuesday, and the accounting meeting I had this morning was looking at the cash flow statement. We always start with that one and look at it. What's cash look like moving forward? What POs are coming in, kind of what credit card spend or any other spend that's going to impact forward-looking cash flow. We look at the KPI sheet that I just shared, the overall one, just the main one, but that's as related to cash. How is cash compared to forecast? So that's kind of our rhythm. We have a weekly rhythm, half an hour meeting, accounting. Our accounting team now looks like, we have 2 staff accountants. We have a senior accounting manager / controller, and then a fractional CFO. The monthly reporting, it's great to have now. But again, to me, it's rear view. So it's just kind of like confirmation of you did the right thing or you didn't do the right thing.
Sure. The scorecard is more in the right direction.
The scorecard is more in the right direction, yeah.
Do you have any other examples of companies out there with a really good flywheel that you look at and you're like, oh, they're doing a great job in this scenario?
I don't know that I really do in particular. I know only because they were the main Build a Bigger Business competition winner, Gymshark. Like talking to them, like we know Ben, the founder. I mean, their flywheel on influencers, obviously, is phenomenal. Like they didn't spend much on advertising compared to what they spent on influencers and those contracts. So I know at the time talking to him, we got a lot of feedback and advice on how to build out, an influencer kind of flywheel down to like contracts and how they write their contracts and length and how they approach people. It didn't, I will say it didn't really work for us, or we didn't, that's not where we chose to focus. Because again, you got to address where you are one, what industry you're in, right? And then will it work for you? So I think influencers work obviously incredibly well for Gymshark, but if you're in maternity and breastfeeding, like that's like 9 months, right? So like, how are you going to be an influencer 2 years later? Their big thing is like 2, 3 to 5 year contracts with influencers. Well, that flywheel wouldn't work for us.
Interesting. So they lock people in early that they see on the way up.
They lock in rising stars early, and then they make them stars. They invest in each other. They invest a lot in their influencers. It's a mutual relationship. They're driving traffic to their influencers are driving traffic to them, but they're locked in for long contracts.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. I feel like that is the way. That's a consistent thing that I've heard about anybody having success with influencers. It's not about going out and getting the biggest influencers now and paying them the money that they want. It's about long-term relationships that are mutually beneficial. It's the same with blenders and Pure Vita bracelets. Like when they talk about their influence, influencers were a big part of their flywheel, and their content creation. And similar, it's like we want to get people who are interesting and growing and get them really excited about the brand, and then get them on long-term contracts to help and create content for us.
Yeah.
That's really, really fascinating. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about managing agencies and freelancers. So you guys, to this day, are you guys still using an agency, or did you bring it in-house for Facebook advertising?
Still use an agency. Yeah. Super happy with our agency. The same agency as Pure Vita and Blenders. So those were 2 great referrals. When I said call referrals, they'd been with Blenders. I know Chase over at Blenders since, I think Blenders was like 2 million or sub 2 million in gross sales. So, if an agency has been with somebody from 2 million to 40 million, they're doing something right.
They can scale it up. They know how to continue to bring the sales.
Yeah.
Someone asked, which agency?
You want me to I'm happy to share. Austin knows who it is as well. It is Some Digital out of San Francisco. SUM, Some Digital. And I know Andrew knows them as well. I think Andrew does, yeah.
So you made the decision to keep it in-house. A lot of people, as they grow, I've seen kind of a trend to move it from agency to in-house, and a bunch of clients that I work with have been doing that. What are some tips you have for having success working with agencies? Just from the perspective of a business owner, and you obviously work with a lot of agents. I'm sure you worked with multiple agencies over time. What are some things that you can share about how you can be more successful as a business owner working with agencies?
Well, I think obviously first it's got to be somebody you trust and enjoy working with. Trust is a big part of it, right? For us, we have shared assets. So I think on the logistics side, we have shared folders, shared Asana projects, and there's just a lot of back and forth collaboration between, their team and our team on what we're working on, what we're pushing coming up, what's working, what's not working. It's just really, I would say that, blocking and tackling, just good communication, sharing of assets, open communication, and having those, clear guidelines like, hey, we want this ROAS or in this range, and then just a willingness to, kind of work together.
Integrate them.
Yeah.
One thing you mentioned earlier that I want to go on when you're going through it was I asked a question about if you could share your resources around quarterly rocks.
Yes.
I'd love to see kind of how you think about structuring goals.
Yeah. Here, I can share my screen. I want to be mindful of everyone's time too. I know Okay, so here's an example of a 90-day sprint around a rock. Can everyone see this okay?
Yeah.
It's showing up. I'll make it a little bigger. So like I said, we take things that we learn and then we make them our own. So this is kind of our own template, right? It's branded. It has our own thing on it. It has 90-day sprint. The one thing, this comes again from the one thing. I just pulled an employee example. This one's older. Prepare items for release of the pumping bra. Due date was the end of the quarter, 3/30/18. Broken down. So set the one thing, get small. This again, it comes right from the one thing, right? And extreme of the 80/20, the vital few. What do you want to accomplish? Outcome goal 1, gather 20 tips for pumping bra release, due to 28. And then work with Hikari on developing infographic tip template, 3/30. So
cool.
That should say 18. So they're sequential, right? You'll notice down here the dates that are broken down into, these are measurable results. Like in 90 days, I want to have our Instagram, following to 8,000 followers. And then that's further broken down into 2-week periods. So break your outcome goal into performance goals over 2-week periods that you can measure, the process. So for example, in 2 weeks, I'm going to email 5 moms regarding reviews. So this one was research pumping tips and facts by 2/2/18. Then 2 weeks later, work with Lauren on pumping maternity blog, 5 topics. Then 2 weeks later, have all tips and explanations to Maggie by 3/2. And then 3/9, meet with Hikari about infographic design. And then 3/16, work with Hikari on pumping template. And then by 3/30, work with Hikari on blog graphics. So again, those are all sequential. And that's the end of the quarter. And this started later than the beginning of the quarter in this case.
Cool.
And then we added to ours, create 2 process goals, because we always want to be creating like processes, SOPs, how-tos. So we have this at the bottom. You do 1 or 2 per quarter. So how to look at ROAS on Pinterest was her SOP, due by 1/12/18. And then how to create sections on Pinterest boards. This is our Pinterest manager here, 1/26/18.
So every employee has one of these for each quarter.
Correct.
Very cool.
And this one was an example from 18. All of these have now moved into Asana. Some members still fill them out this way, but we've now created an Asana template that kind of mirrors this.
And are they filling them out themselves, or they do? They do.
Yeah. So you would talk through ideas with your direct manager. Maybe there's 2 or 3, like, hey, I was thinking of working on this, or this, or the manager would come with ideas. And then you decide together, and then you fill it all out as the team member.
Cool. Garret, this has been awesome. I want to be respectful of your time and everybody here. Thank you so much for hopping on here and sharing some of what you've learned. Really appreciate it. Appreciate your willingness to do that and to be out there sharing what you've got. So thanks so much. It's good to talk with you. And yeah, man, I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks, Austin. Good seeing you.
Good to see you too.